Imagine a system designed not just to educate, but to fundamentally reshape society by subtly, deliberately undermining foundational skills and values.
Hmm,
It sounds like something pulled straight from a dystopian novel, doesn't it?
it really does.
But what if some argue this isn't fiction, but the hidden, unfolding story of American education? Why do some assert that our schools aren't just struggling, but are deliberately doing just that, risking our children's academic and moral future?
It's a profoundly unsettling question, and one that, for many, I think, challenges the very core of what we believe about our public institutions, their benevolent intent.
Absolutely. Welcome to the Dupe Dive. Today, we're plunging into an incredibly extensive and, let's be clear, highly controversial work, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Iserby.
A massive undertaking, that book.
It really is. Our mission with this deep dive is to meticulously unpack the author's core arguments, trace the historical connections she draws, sometimes across centuries, and uncover the often surprising, certainly provocative insights she presents.
Yeah.
We're here to understand what this source says is happening and why the author believes it profoundly matters for the future of society. This isn't about endorsing or refuting,
No, absolutely not.
but about truly understanding the intricate tapestry of claims Iserbyt weaves.
Indeed. It's crucial to remember that our goal is really just to explore Iserbyt's claims, the web of evidence she presents, allowing you, the listener, to engage with these ideas directly from her perspective. The author herself frames her work as a vital call to awareness. She specifically wrote this huge book for her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren.
It's quite a dedication.
It is. Her explicit purpose is for them to understand the often overlooked small-town wars, these quiet, persistent struggles fought by those who dared to tell the truth against all odds about the direction of American education. She sees it as a legacy, really, a warning and empowerment.
Okay, so let's begin by truly unpacking the author's core thesis. At its heart, Charlotte Iserby argues there's a deliberate dumbing down of America's children. And she contends this isn't an accidental byproduct of policy or funding, but an intentional process, one risking them academically and morally. She's not merely pointing to falling test scores.
No, it's deeper than that for her.
She's identifying specific educational programs and methodologies that, in her view, are actively, maybe even designedly, creating huge learning problems.
That's a crucial distinction she makes, yeah.
Yeah.
Iserby points to a number of pedagogical approaches she claims are key components of this alleged dumbing down.
Like what specifically?
Well, for instance, she highlights whole language, the reading method that kind of downplays phonics, teaching kids to recognize whole words or guess from context.
Okay.
She also singles out mastery learning, where students don't move on until they've supposedly mastered something, often through lots of drills.
Repetitive, yeah.
Then there's direct instruction, which is very structured, very teacher-led, and perhaps most controversially, Skinnerian operant conditioning.
Skinnerian. Like B.F. Skinner.
Right.
Behaviorism.
Exactly. Applying behavioral psychology principles, reinforcement to shape student behavior. Iserbyt argues these methods, even though they seem different, lead to widespread academic attrition.
And she connects this to things like ADD.
Yes, manifesting in issues like attention deficit disorder and, controversially she claims, the widespread drugging of children with Ritalin. It's a stark picture she paints, suggesting academic deficiency isn't a failure of the system, but a direct intended consequence of these methods.
And her critique extends far beyond just academics, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned the moral dimension.
Absolutely. The author raises a profound red flag regarding what she calls moral decay in education. She zeroes in specifically on the teaching of moral relativism.
Meaning, no right or wrong.
Essentially, yeah, a philosophy asserting there are no right, no wrong ethics. For Iserbyt, this isn't just some abstract philosophical debate. It's a deliberate erosion of traditional moral foundations.
Okay.
She's particularly critical of the push by what she calls the radical center, this supposed, often unseen alliance of left-wing liberals and right-wing conservatives.
An unlikely pairing.
Right. But she argues they push for common ground character education. The author views this as simply warmed-over values education, stuff she says has been resisted by alert parent groups for decades.
So old ideas repackaged.
Exactly. For Iserbyt, this alleged manipulation of public opinion to accept previously rejected ideas is a perfect example of the Hegelian dialectic at work.
Okay, the Hegelian dialectic. Can you unpack how she uses that concept? It sounds important to her framework.
It's really central. Iserbyt uses the Hegelian dialectic constantly, to explain how seemingly opposing forces are, she believes, manipulated to achieve a predetermined synthesis, often without the public catching on.
How does it work in practice, according to her?
She describes how a thesis, let's say traditional conservative moral values, and an antithesis, maybe more progressive views on ethics, are brought into conflict, often through public debate or maybe even manufactured crises.
Okay, thesis versus antithesis.
Then this radical center emerges with a synthesis, like that common ground character education we mentioned. It looks like a reasonable compromise, right? A third way.
Seems plausible.
But in Iserbyt's view, this synthesis, subtly but effectively, pushes society further towards the radical agenda she claims was planned all along. She argues this process allows changes that would face huge resistance if presented directly. It sort of subverts genuine public consensus.
Interesting. So, connecting this back historically, she argues these aren't just recent issues. She makes this really profound claim about the foundation of the whole government education system tracing back to Prussia in the 1840s and 50s.
Yes, exactly. A Prussian import, she calls it. And for Iserbyt, this isn't just some historical footnote. She sees it as the blueprint for everything that followed.
How does she back that up, connecting mid-19th century Prussia to today's issues?
Well, she dives into historical records, arguing that figures like Horace Mann observed the Prussian system and really pushed for its adoption here in the U.S.
Yeah.
She contends this Prussian model, unlike, say, education focused on individual academics or classics, was designed specifically to instill obedience, conformity, and values needed for a highly structured state.
So less about learning, more about compliance.
That's her argument. She traces how Hegelian philosophy, with its focus on the state as the ultimate moral authority. Iserbyt quotes Hegel believing the state was God walking on earth, got embedded in this imported system.
Wow, the state as God.
Yeah. For Iserbyt, it wasn't just about building efficient schools. It was a direct philosophical lineage, intended to shift allegiance from individual liberty and maybe religious principles toward state supremacy.
Laying the groundwork, basically.
Laying the ideological groundwork for what she calls a juggernaut toward a socialist fascist system. Building a centralized system meant for social engineering, not intellectual freedom.
That is a truly unsettling vision for the purpose of public education. And stemming from that, her proposed solution is equally radical, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. She argues for nothing less than restoring educational freedom directly to parents and systematically removing all federal government coercive policies.
So get the federal government out entirely.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
For her, the billions spent by the federal government aren't just inefficient. She claims they are actively destroying educational freedom and perpetuating this alleged dumbing down and brainwashing.
She connects the cost directly to this agenda.
Very directly. Iserbyt argues that providing basic academic skills shouldn't be that expensive. So the sheer escalating cost of the current system, especially with federal involvement, is, for her, a strong indicator of a radical agenda.
Meaning the money isn't going to academics.
Right. She states the purpose of which is to change values and attitudes, brainwash, that is the costly agenda. She argues the huge spending isn't for academic excellence, but for societal manipulation. In essence, she claims brainwashing by our schools and universities is what is bankrupting our nation and our children's minds. A direct link. Financial strain and cognitive or moral erosion.
Okay, let's dig deeper into what Iserbyt identifies as some of the early seeds of this alleged transformation. She prominently points to figures like John Dewey.
Ah, Dewey, a central figure in her critique.
Right. She identifies him not just as an influential educator, but specifically as a psychologist, a Fabian socialist, and the father of progressive education. She claims Dewey used psychological theories from Wilhelm Wundt in Germany theories focused solely with experience to basically birth behavioral psychology.
Iserbyt's portrayal of Dewey is absolutely pivotal to her argument. She describes his approach as fundamentally aimed at conditioning students for a new social order.
Conditioning, like Pavlov's dogs.
Much like Pavlov's famous stimulus response experiments.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the parallel she draws. For her, this wasn't about fostering individual critical thinking in the traditional sense. It was about systematically altering behavior and attitudes to fit a predetermined societal model.
How did he propose doing that?
She highlights Dewey's radical recommendation to build curriculum not around traditional academic subjects, history, literature, advanced math, but primarily around occupational activities and peer interaction and socialization.
So more like job training and getting along.
That's how Iserbyt interprets it. A deliberate shift away from academic rigor towards vocational training and social conditioning. preparing individuals for specific roles in a collective rather than empowering them for independent thought.
And here's where it gets really unsettling, I think, offering insight into her view of this agenda. She makes the surprising claim that Dewey, the father of progressive education, actually wanted to change traditional academic skills and high literacy.
Right, this is a key point.
Why? Because, she asserts, high literacy produced independent intelligence, which he saw as basically antisocial.
Think about that.
Yeah, the very notion that critical thought, advanced reading, intellectual independence could be seen as negative, as antisocial for some new social order. What does she argue this implies?
Precisely. For Iserbyt, this isn't just about new teaching methods. It's a chilling insight into what she sees as a deliberate attempt to reshape the cognitive and social fabric.
How so?
She argues that fostering anti-social independent thought and high literacy would prevent the smooth integration of individuals into a preordained collective. A new social order where conformity and group identity are prioritized over individual autonomy.
So the insight is the intent.
The alleged intent, exactly from her perspective, to create a populace less capable of independent critical analysis, less likely to question authority, making them more amenable to external control and a specific vision for society. The goal wasn't to elevate individual intellect, she claims, but to manage and direct it.
Okay, to connect this vision to institutions, Iserbyt also ties this alleged agenda to early philanthropic and socialist movements. She points to the General Education Board, the GEB.
Right, Rockefeller-funded.
Incorporated by Congress in 1902, endowed by John D. Rockefeller Sr., its stated purpose was to experiment with early innovations in education.
But Iserbyt suggests these innovations were far from benign. She meticulously details connections, noting the founding of the Intercollegiate Socialist Society, ISS, in 1905.
By figures like Upton Sinclair.
Upton Sinclair, Jack London, prominent socialists. This group later became the League for Industrial Democracy, LID. And significantly, she highlights that John Dewey himself,
It's the same Dewey.
the very father of progressive education she critiques, became its president in 1939. For Iserbyt, this isn't coincidence. It's how she directly links major education reform and influential figures to specific socialist ties and an agenda she believes aimed at societal transformation through education.
So the GEB was Rockefeller's educational laboratory for these aims.
That's her interpretation, yes. Testing grounds for broader socialist goals, as she sees it.
Moving into the philosophical underpinnings of control, Iserbyt doesn't just focus on Dewey. She also links the Montessori method from 1912 to deeper, maybe more esoteric roots like Theosophy, Hinduism, the New Age World Core curriculum.
Yes, this is a really interesting and often overlooked part of her analysis. She asserts that a significant portion of Maria Montessori's work was actually printed by the Theosophical Publishing House.
Really?
Yeah, and she notes Montessori herself lived with Theosophists in India for a time. Iserbyt quotes sources praising Montessori's cosmic education for its popularity among Hindus and Theosophists, suggesting it aligned with their spiritual frameworks.
So a hidden spiritual agenda.
Well, she goes as far as citing Robert Muller, a big figure in the New Age movement, author of the New Age World Core Curriculum, who apparently claimed the Montessori method would greatly benefit global children for the New Age. For Iserbyt, this implies that what looks like an innovative teaching technique is actually subtly embedding specific spiritual and philosophical ideas. Ideas that align with a globalist New Age vision rather than, say, traditional Western or Judeo-Christian values. A deliberate infusion of specific beliefs into education.
And this alleged dumbing down isn't just general skills or morals, and it's not ancient history. She tells this really shocking anecdote about modern math.
Ah, yes, the math story.
She recounts a 1940s school philosophy committee meeting. A member of the Communist Party of Russia supposedly said, and this is a quote she provides, "That is what we want. A math that the pupils cannot apply to life situations when they get out of school."
It's a bombshell quote, if accurate.
What does Iserby argue this reveals about the intent behind curriculum changes?
For Iserbyt, this anecdote is like a smoking gun. It reveals the alleged deliberate intent behind specific curriculum changes. That statement, she argues, highlights a conscious desire to make math impractical, disconnected from the real world.
So the goal wasn't better math, but less applicable math.
To disable students' ability to use math for independent problem-solving or practical life. That's her claim. Potentially making them less self-sufficient, more reliant on external systems.
Did this change happen?
Iserbyt claims that despite some initial resistance, people finding it too radical, this worthless radical change in math education, was introduced in 1952.
And the result.
She points to the outcome. Current high school graduates not knowing any math, and concludes the results are supposed to be worthless. For Iserbyt, this isn't an accidental failure of reform. It demonstrates that academic deficiency in core subjects is, in some cases, an intended and achieved outcome, a deliberate plan.
Okay, let's shift from the historical foundations to what Iserby describes as the actual mechanisms of transformation. She focuses heavily on behavioral control in education here.
Yes, this is a major part of her argument.
She pinpoints the late 40s, early 50s, 48 to 53 as crucial, citing B.F. Skinner, Alfred Kinsey, and Benjamin Bloom as what she calls deconstruction tools. Let's start with Skinner operant conditioning. How does she present his theories?
Iserbyt really digs into Skinner's theories, especially from his big works like Science and Human Behavior and Beyond Freedom and Dignity. She highlights Skinner's strong claim, which she finds deeply unsettling. The individual does not initiate anything.
Wow.
And she quotes him further. Anytime man is freed from one kind of control, he merely comes under another kind of control. For Iserbyt, Skinner's core belief that all behavior is determined not from within but from without is foundational to the dumbing down agenda.
So, no free will, we're just programmed.
That's how she interprets his philosophy. It fundamentally denies free will, portrays humans as entirely programmable. A perfect philosophical basis, she argues, for a system designed to manipulate behavior.
So Iserbyt argues Skinner reduces humanity to just external conditioning, no individual agency.
Pretty much, yeah. Negating individual agency and inherent worth. And she takes this chilling idea further, looking at Skinner's fictional community, Walden 2.
His utopian novel.
Right, but she sees it as a literal blueprint for societal control. She asks, what specific details support her claim that it's a real-world plan for behavior management by the unchosen?
What details does she highlight?
It's crucial for her. She sees Walden 2 not as just a thought experiment, but as a chillingly precise blueprint she claims is being implemented.
How so?
She details specific things Skinner envisioned. Children reared by the state, separated from parents early on, ensuring no love or affection to do with blood is fostered.
State-raised children.
History, she notes, is honored only as entertainment, stripped of its lessons or critical reflection. The people are constantly always thinking of the whole group and inherently opposed to competition.
Groupthink, basically.
For Iserbyt, these aren't just story details. She sees this whole fictional world as a direct, real-world plan for behavior management by the unchosen, where individual autonomy, family bonds, history, competition are all systematically eroded to create a compliant collective society. Total control through conditioning, not overt force.
It's quite a vision she paints, not just what's taught, but how and the outcomes. And she connects this to Benjamin Bloom, another key figure.
Yes, Bloom and his taxonomy, mastery learning.
How does she integrate Bloom's work into this narrative of behavioral control?
Iserbyt states that Benjamin Bloom, often called the father of mastery learning, believes something she finds deeply problematic for traditional education. She quotes Bloom. The purpose of education is to change the thoughts, actions, and feelings of students.
Change thoughts, actions, and feelings.
Yes. For Iserbyt, that goes way beyond just imparting knowledge or encouraging critical thinking. It's about direct, intentional reshaping of a student's inner world, cognition, behavior, emotions.
So social engineering through education.
She argues it aligns perfectly with Skinner's ideas about external control, framing education as a tool for engineering specific human outcomes, not fostering individual growth or intellectual freedom.
And then there's Alfred Kinsey. This connection might seem less obvious. How does Iserbyt link Kinsey's very controversial work on sexuality to this broader grand scheme?
This is where Iserbyt synthesizes different fields into her argument. She links Kinsey's influential sexual behavior in the human male from 1948 to what she calls a grand scheme to loosen traditional moral constraints around sexuality.
So not just a scientific study.
Not in her view. She claims it was strategically designed to advance a eugenic future, envisioned by elite scientists of the new biology. She argues that by normalizing and cataloging a wide range of sexual behaviors, Kinsey's work served to undermine traditional family structures, moral codes, individual responsibility in sexual matters.
A deliberate disruption.
This loosening, in her view, was a deliberate step towards disrupting societal cohesion, making individuals more susceptible to control, less anchored to traditional values.
What's fascinating is how she brings these three, Bloom, Kinsey, Skinner, together. How does she argue their combined impact led to what she calls future moral chaos?
She concludes their combined work provided the ingredients for future moral chaos. For Iserbyt, each chipped away at the traditional God-fearing, educated man of the early 20th century.
How so?
Skinner provided the behavioral control tools. Bloom defined the educational goal as changing students' inner states. And Kinsey, she argues, started the systematic erosion of moral boundaries around sexuality.
A three-pronged attack.
She argues their combined impact systematically removed the metaphysical, spiritual, traditional moral anchors from education and society, leaving no place for the human soul or inherent spiritual worth in this kind of science. The result, she says, is a deliberate path toward a society unmoored from traditional ethics.
And to really drive home the philosophy behind this alleged control, she cites Bertrand Russell's 1951 book, Impact of Science Upon Society. A chilling quote. Education should aim at destroying free will.
A stark statement.
So that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished.
It is powerful. And Russell, as quoted by Iserbyt, elaborates on the techniques.
Like what?
He suggests methods like verses set to music and repeatedly intoned, implying repetitive, almost hypnotic indoctrination. He also talks about making children believe that snow is black, an extreme example of shaping perception against reality.
Controlling thought itself.
For Iserbyt, the goal here, as Russell envisioned it, is complete control, without armies or policemen. She sees this as a direct philosophical precursor, an explicit endorsement of the extensive use of behavior modification techniques on students today.
So these techniques aren't just classroom management.
Not in her view. They're about systematically preparing students to submit to what she sees as totalitarian controls later in life, making them incapable of independent thought or resistance.
This brings us to what Iserbyt calls the gradualism and semantic deception strategy, essential to how these changes get implemented, she claims.
Yes, the boiling frog analogy comes up a lot here.
Right, the frog in gradually heating water. She says this gradualism works through created crises and the Hegelian dialectical process, leading us to accept more radical change than we would ever otherwise accept. Can you elaborate on this gradualism?
Iserbyt emphasizes that the radical changes she identifies are rarely rolled out suddenly or transparently. They're implemented incrementally, slowly, subtly, to minimize public resistance like the frog not noticing the water heating up.
How do created crises fit in?
She claims created crises, manufactured problems or perceived urgent needs, are often used to justify these changes. Then the Hegelian dialectic kicks in. Present a problem, thesis, provoke a reaction, antithesis, offer a solution, synthesis.
And the solution moves the agenda forward.
Exactly. The solution, while seeming to fix the crisis, actually pushes the agenda further towards the predetermined, more radical goal. For Iserbyt, gradualism and crisis management are key strategies to overcome public resistance and achieve societal transformation without a big fight, lulling people into accepting changes they'd otherwise reject.
And a core part of this is semantic deception, using nice-sounding language to hide controversial agendas. Can you give an example, like with values clarification?
Absolutely. Values clarification programs are a prime example for her. She describes how programs that were initially highly controversial, facing rejection from parents and school boards for perceived moral relativism, were simply rebranded.
Given a new name.
Right. Presented under a new, less threatening name, like a decision-making program or critical thinking skills. For Iserbyt, this is a deliberate strategy, relabeling to overcome resistance, introducing the same content under a more palatable disguise.
So the public accepts something they already rejected.
She argues they often unknowingly accept programs containing the very elements they opposed just because the language used sounds acceptable, sanitized.
Another example she uses is parent-school partnerships. Sounds great, right? How does she argue this is also semantic deception, especially with technology involved?
Iserbyt asserts that while terms like parent-school partnerships sound admirable, cooperative, they are, in her view, superb examples of semantic deception.
How so?
She argues that as technology, especially computers, gets more integrated into education, it removes the human element from many interactions. This tech shift, she contends, facilitates a more standardized, controlled environment. Parental input becomes less about real collaboration, more about complying with systemic goals.
So partnership really means compliance.
She suggests these partnerships can become a mechanism for schools to dictate parental behavior at home, rather than being a truly reciprocal relationship. The benevolent phrasing, for her, masks a deeper agenda of control and standardization. Parents are subtly co-opted into supporting a system they might otherwise question.
This leads directly to her critique of the rise of scientific education and accountability. She presents mastery learning, ML, direct instruction, DI, and outcome-based education, OBE, as basically interchangeable terms,
Yes, she lumps them together.
as key components of workforce training and attitude and value change. All rooted, she claims, in Skinnerian methodology, operant conditioning for predictable results. How does she elaborate on that connection?
Iserbyt consistently argues these methods, whatever their names, share that common Skinnerian foundation. Mastery learnings focus on isolated skills and drills. Direct instructions, scripted lessons. Outcome-based educations focus on predetermined behaviors over academic content.
They aren't primarily about learning in her view.
Not about fostering deep understanding or critical thought, no. She claims they're designed for workforce training and attitude and value change. For Iserbyt, these are tools for conditioning students to produce predictable results.
Results that fit.
Results that align with the needs of a planned economy and a specific social order, she argues. Not about nurturing independent individuals, she sees them as instrumental in turning children into compliant human resources.
So it's not just what is taught, but how it's taught. And she argues that payment for results and outcome-based education lead directly to teaching to the test.
A major criticism of hers.
How does she critique that practice?
She sharply criticizes payment for results and OBE, arguing they inevitably lead to teaching to the test. This narrows education significantly, she says, reducing complex subjects to just testable facts and skills.
What about the impact on teachers?
For teachers, she points out, it creates immense pressure. They're judged and paid according to students' test scores, shifting their focus from real teaching to just getting high scores, regardless of true understanding.
And for students.
Iserbyt states, quite forcefully, chanting back what a teacher chants is not learning, it is training. She argues this approach reduces children to raw resource to be prepared and molded as a product for some predetermined future, instead of nurturing their curiosity or potential. It's dehumanizing, she says, driven by the need for measurable, controllable outcomes.
She also critiques the emphasis on the science of education, the focus on quantifiable, measurable, and scientifically demonstrable performance. She argues this ignores the human soul, metaphysics.
Right. For Iserbyt, this push for education to be purely scientific and measurable is deeply troubling because it excludes crucial parts of human experience.
Wait, what?
By focusing only on quantifiable, measurable performance, she argues psychology and education dismiss the human soul, free will, metaphysics, anything you can't empirically measure. The scientific reductionism rooted in Skinner views humans not as complex individuals with inner lives, spiritual dimensions, but as mere inputs and outputs in a system.
And she sees evidence of this shift.
She points to a 1994 legislative description that actually called basic academic skills and the emphasis on repetitive drill and practice in elementary school a disproven theory. She implies this was a deliberate move away from foundational methods seen as too unscientific, regardless of past effectiveness. Part of redefining human potential in purely utilitarian, measurable terms.
And the shift in accountability is a core concern, too. Traditionally, accountability meant the state providing resources, input, like funding, teachers.
Right.
But now, she says, it's about the state guaranteeing achievement or output, individual student success measured by standardized metrics. What are the implications of that shift, in her view?
Iserbyt sees this shift as profoundly significant, moving control from local input to centralized output. What's really unsettling for her is her interpretation of the word assess.
Assess.
She argues assess historically means assigning a value for tax purposes. This leads her to theorize that within this new accountability framework, children's potential worth to society will eventually be measured and their future life roles projected, and they would be limited by that assigned worth.
Wow. So assessments aren't just about learning, but about pricing individuals for society.
That's the provocative claim she makes. Not just evaluating learning, but categorizing and predetermining an individual's societal role based on their measurable worth.
She takes that claim even further, suggesting a value-added tax process linked to education.
Yes, painting a chilling picture. A system that will deduct from an education super voucher a tax for every level of achievement skill a student achieves.
A tax on learning.
And she claims this system will track students and families with penalties for non-achievement. It's a vision of education deeply integrated into a controlling economic and social system.
Seems extreme.
Indeed. Iserbyt views this as the logical end of the scientific approach. Total quantification and control. This proposed value-added tax isn't just financial, it's a system of constant surveillance and punishment, she argues. Deducting a tax based on achievement, tracking families, penalties. It suggests a deeply centralized, intrusive system.
The ultimate commodification.
For Iserbyt, it's the ultimate expression of children as raw resource. Their worth, future, financial standing, determined by a state-controlled assessment system. The complete commodification of human potential where every skill is assigned a value for systemic control.
Okay, let's broaden the lens now to the interconnected web. Iserbyt describes global, federal, corporate influence converging on education.
Right, the bigger picture connections she draws.
She traces this back significantly to post-WWII internationalism and a push for centralization, citing the Federal Council of Churches in 1942 promoting a new order of economic life and even a duly constituted world government, and the Chamber of Commerce supporting a unified, controlled world economy. What does she argue this early post-war convergence reveals?
Iserbyt sees this as crucial evidence of a coordinated long-term agenda. She asks, why were these different groups, a religious body, a business lobby, both pushing for centralized globalist visions so early?
Her answer.
For Iserbyt, it's because they were aligned with an overarching agenda that would need a restructured education system to prepare citizens for this new order. It wasn't just post-war rebuilding, but a deliberate shift towards global governance, where national sovereignty and local control diminish.
And education was the tool.
Education, in her view, became a primary vehicle for instilling the values and attitudes needed for this unified, controlled world economy and world government.
And it wasn't just statements from organizations. She points to a specific 1961 government publication.
Yes, the Health, Education, and Welfare Publication, a federal education agency for the future.
She calls it a blueprint for complete domination and direction of our schools from Washington. That's strong language. What does she highlight from it?
Iserbyt argues this 1961 document laid out a plan for centralizing control. She highlights its emphasis on federal activity in formulating educational policies, a direct assault, she says, on local control.
What else?
The document discusses international education projects in cooperation with UNESCO, showing a global, not just national focus. And significantly, it points to social scientists as key advisors in shaping policy.
So not just federal involvement, but international and expert-driven.
For Iserbyt, it's a systematic takeover. Washington, guided by international bodies and social scientists, dictates curriculum, pedagogy, philosophy, transforming schools into tools for national and international policy, not local community service.
Building on that, she points to Eisenhower's Commission on National Goals in 1960 and its report, Goals for Americans, as pushing the planned economy idea.
Yes, another step in that direction, she argues.
And then the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, ESEA, of 1965. She marks this as the turning point, the end of local control and the beginning of internationalization of education. Why was ESEA so pivotal for her?
Iserbyt sees ESEA 1965 as the legislative hammer that cemented federal control. Before ESEA, federal involvement was minimal, mostly advisory. This act brought significant federal funding, and with it,
strings attached.
Federal mandates and regulations that she argues effectively bypassed local school boards and states. For Iserbyt, it wasn't just about providing resources, it was about establishing a direct pipeline of federal influence over curriculum, standards, accountability.
Transforming education structure.
Transforming it from a community-driven enterprise into a nationally and eventually internationally directed system, paving the way, she claims, for the broader planned economy and global agenda.
And connecting this to centralized control, she brings up the planning, programming, budgeting system, PPBS, applied to education in 67.
Right, PPBS.
She calls it a management tool of political strategy, essentially the same as TQM, total quality management, leading to centralized control. How is a bureaucratic system like PPBS a mechanism for political control?
Iserbyt interprets PPBS, and things like TQM later, as industrial management tools co-opted for political ends in education. These systems require quantifying outcomes, setting measurable objectives, a top-down, centralized approach to planning and budgeting.
So a business model for schools.
Applying such a rigid business-like framework to education, she argues, inevitably leads to centralized control. It shifts decision-making away from local, flexible, human approaches towards a standardized, results-driven model dictated from above.
Mirroring industry.
She contends it mirrors industrial management, where individuals are resources to be optimized for specific outputs. aligning perfectly with her claim that education is being geared towards creating compliant workers for a planned economy, not fostering independent thought.
Iserbyt also draws direct, often unsettling, parallels with the Soviet Union. She quotes Bela V. Dodd, a former high-ranking U.S. Communist Party member.
Yes, the Dodd quote.
Dodd stated that the Communist Party as a whole adopted a line of being for progressive education. What's the significance of this convergence, according to Iserbyt?
This is critical for her argument about the alleged underlying unity of seemingly opposing forces. The fact that the Communist Party supported progressive education, the very movement led by figures like Dewey, who she also links to socialism, reveals, for her, a deeper shared agenda beyond political labels.
Meaning?
She suggests both systems, despite ideological differences, saw the power of progressive education to shape social values, instill collective thinking, prepare citizens for a centrally planned society, whether communist or, as she argues, a socialist-fascist system developing in the West. The methods of control and social engineering transcend traditional politics, hinting at a hidden common goal.
What's particularly striking is her detailing of U.S.-Soviet education agreements in the 1980s.
Yes, under Reagan and Gorbachev.
Not just government agreements, but also parallel ones between the Carnegie Corporation and the Soviet Academy of Sciences, involving specific actions, exchange of educational and teaching materials, including textbooks, syllabi and curricula, and joint research on the application of computers in early elementary education. What did she argue was the purpose here?
Iserbyt views these agreements as profoundly significant, a deliberate harmonization of educational systems across the Cold War divide. For her, exchanging textbooks, syllabi, and curricula indicates a systematic effort to align educational content and philosophy.
And the computer research.
That's particularly concerning to her. She sees computer-assisted learning as a key tool for behavioral conditioning and data collection. She argues these collaborations weren't just academic exchange, they were about achieving a global educational consensus to facilitate a new world order.
Even under a conservative U.S. president.
That irony is something she often points out, suggesting the agenda transcended traditional politics, driven by powerful, unelected entities like foundations.
And she quotes Dr. David Hamburg, then president of Carnegie Corporation, suggesting foundations can operate in areas government may prefer to avoid.
A very telling quote in her view.
Implying a bypass of democratic processes. And just 2 years later, 1987, she cites Gorbachev declaring, "We are moving toward a new world, the world of communism. We shall never turn off that road." What's the chilling implication she draws from these statements together?
For Iserbyt, Dr. Hamburg's statement is a direct admission of what she sees as a subtle subversion of public accountability. Foundations operating where government may prefer to avoid reveals, she argues, a strategy to push controversial agendas through private channels, bypassing public debate and oversight.
And Gorbachev's statement.
When coupled with Gorbachev's emphatic declaration about moving toward the world of communism after these collaboration agreements, Iserbyt sees a clear, unwavering trajectory. She finds it telling that even after the Berlin Wall fell, Gorbachev remained prominent, even speaking at GOP fundraisers.
So the agenda persisted?
For Iserbyt, it illustrates the underlying agenda for global transformation through education persisted, transcending geopolitics and parties, pointing to a deep, often hidden alignment of influential actors towards a predetermined future.
Iserbyt further highlights international models she believes served as blueprints, citing articles from 1976 about Cuban children combined studies, work, and communist Chinese education as a model for U.S. education. How are these used?
She emphasizes how these foreign models, particularly from communist nations, presented education not as academic, but as a means of social and economic integration.
Like the Cuban example.
The Cuban model explicitly combined studies with work, implying education's main purpose was preparing kids for the workforce and collective economy from a young age.
And the Chinese model.
Similarly, in China, she highlights how cultural activities were designed to provide a vehicle for transmitting new social values. Iserby draws a direct line from these practices to similar goals in U.S. schools, like the use of leisure or citizenship education.
So seemingly innocent terms mask a deeper agenda.
She argues these terms mask an agenda to integrate children into a collective planned society, rather than fostering individual pursuits or traditional academics. These foreign examples, for her, show a shared global vision for education as a tool of social engineering.
So it's not just federal and international influence, but also significant corporate and private sector integration she dissects. Initiatives like Goals 2000 and America 2000.
Right. Largely driven, she claims, by the Carnegie Corporation's restructuring agenda. Plans, she says, were proposals to radically restructure American society.
America 2000 envisions schools open 12 hours a day, year-round, for infants to 18-year-olds.
Yes. The brand new American school would be year-round, open from 6 to 6 for children 3 months to 18 years. What does she argue is the deeper intent behind such sweeping proposals and corporate involvement?
What is it?
Iserbyt views Goals 2000 and America 2000 not just as education reforms, but as part of a larger corporate-driven restructuring of society. That 6 to 6 year-round school vision is alarming to her. She interprets it as total institutionalization of children, cradle to grave, effectively taking over traditional family roles. The deep involvement of corporations, often via foundations like Carnegie, signifies a shift where education's purpose aligns with business needs, transforming schools into training grounds for a specific workforce, not centers of liberal arts or individual development, a move towards cradle-to-grave control and conformity, she argues.
And the restructuring goals explicitly demand student outcomes should meet employability criteria suggested by business and industry.
A direct link. Education's purpose tied to workforce needs.
She notes plans to build a coalition of business, community, education, and political leaders to bring external pressure on the education system for productive change.
How does she view this coalition?
For Iserbyt, this coalition is a deliberate consolidation of power designed to exert irresistible pressure. By bringing together business, community, education, and political leaders, she argues, it bypasses democratic processes and public input.
And the focus on employability criteria. That focus as the primary measure of student outcomes signifies, for her, a profound shift in education's purpose. From fostering intellectual growth and civic engagement to merely producing a workforce compliant with corporate demands. A top-down, unelected body dictating educational success, eroding local control and academic freedom, aligning education with a planned economy.
This leads her to a pointed critique of choice and vouchers, often championed as empowering parents.
Right.
But Iserbyt argues they are taxpayer-funded and consequently government-controlled, citing the childcare industry's regulation after tax deductions came in. Why is she so skeptical? Why beware of choice proposals?
Her skepticism comes from her belief that any program funded by taxpayers, even if it looks like choice, will ultimately lead to government control and regulation.
Like the childcare example.
It's exactly. Initial tax deductions were followed by increased government regulation of childcare facilities. For her, it shows a pattern. Funding follows control. She argues choice and vouchers, while seeming to empower parents, will inevitably lead to private schools and alternatives becoming subject to the same federal mandates, curricula, assessments she critiques in public schools.
So true freedom requires financial independence from government.
That's her argument. Otherwise, the illusion of choice just expands the reach of centralized control.
What's truly unsettling and core to her argument about total systemic control is her description of the Community Learning Information Network, CLIN, from 1992.
Ah, yes, CLIN.
She describes it as a system to link every public and private school, as well as every institution of higher education and corporate and industrial training sites.
A vast network.
With the stated goal, she claims, for CLIN to not have to worry about citizens who resist Goals of 2000 reform, using tech like two-way interactive video, networked computer-assisted learning, interactive cable, and electronic mail. What's the ultimate purpose of such a network?
Iserbyt presents LAN as the technological backbone of the whole dumbing down and control agenda. This vast network is far more than just information sharing, in her view.
What is it then?
Its stated goal to not have to worry about citizens who resist Goals 2000 reform is, for her, a chilling admission of its true purpose. Create an environment where dissent or nonconformity is eliminated or made irrelevant.
Yeah.
By linking every educational and training site using advanced interactive tech, Iserbyt argues LAN is designed to standardize curriculum, disseminate approved content, facilitate behavior modification, and track individuals within a comprehensive, controlled learning ecosystem. A key mechanism for creating a completely managed society where education is tightly integrated with workforce needs and social engineering, and individual resistance is systemically neutralized.
Okay, let's dive into the real-world impact she describes and the resistance. She details controversial curricula, starting with Project Read from 1968, Carnegie-funded.
Yes, the reading program examples.
She claims its programmed textbooks had images and captions inciting arson and guerrilla warfare. Can you describe these provocative examples?
Iserbyt provides specific, shocking examples. She describes images like a porch on a porch next to a caption that, she interprets, leads a child to identify a man who deliberately commits the criminal act of setting a home on fire.
Other examples.
Other unsettling juxtapositions, comparing an American flag to a rag, showing people kneeling in church next to a horse being taught to kneel, implying references just conditioned behavior, a boy throwing darts at a companion.
What does she say these signify?
For Iserbyt, these aren't accidental. She sees them as clear instances of tragic indoctrination into antisocial ideas that alienate children from mainstream American middle-class values. She argues these materials weren't just teaching reading, but undermining traditional norms and instilling destructive behaviors.
And then there's the survival game from 1974, part of a curriculum on meeting modern problems.
Right, the shipwreck game.
Students decide who is worthy of survival. The priest, the lawyer, the pregnant mother, angry teenager, etc. Iserby calls this pure humanistic curricula. What's her critique?
Iserbyt views the survival game as a chilling example of pure humanistic curricula, deliberately undermining traditional morals and conscience. Forcing children to make life-or-death decisions based on subjective worthiness teaches moral relativism and utilitarian ethics, she argues.
Meaning?
The idea that lives can be weighed and sacrificed for the greater good. For her, this chips away at the inherent sanctity of life, encourages a cold, calculated morality rather than empathy or absolute principles. A deliberate attempt, she believes, to shape values for a new social order where individual worth is determined by utility.
What about the fifth-grade classroom experiment she describes? The psychosocial approach.
The blonde, brown-haired experiment, deeply disturbing as she recounts it.
Where blonde children sit in the back, isolated, not permitted to participate, while brown-haired students were told to pick on, insult, make fun of, or taunt the blondes, all to teach about prejudice.
Yes. Iserbyt directly compares this to Russian and Chinese brainwashing.
Why such a strong comparison?
She presents this as irrefutable evidence of manipulative, psychologically damaging methods. Not genuine education, but direct behavior modification and psychological manipulation. Creating artificial discrimination, forcing kids into victim-tormentor roles, she argues, traumatize them, and instill division.
So, like brainwashing.
But her comparison isn't light. She believes these tactics break down resilience, foster collective guilt or conformity, make children more susceptible to external control and emotional manipulation. A demonstration, she says, of how deep psychological control has become in education, moving beyond academics into coercive social engineering.
She also raises concerns about brain-based learning, using snakes, dimming lights, playing soft music, questioning the scientific basis.
Iserbyt looks at these brain-based learning practices skeptically. While seemingly innovative, she questions their true scientific grounding and, more importantly, their potential to distract from core academics or even manipulate student states. Using live snakes, dim lights, soft music might be presented as engaging different brain parts or creating relaxation. But Iserbyt implies these methods, divorced from academic rigor, could be part of the broader agenda to shift education from intellectual content towards sensory experience, emotional conditioning, maybe even a form of non-transparent control. Examples of an experimental, possibly manipulative approach prioritizing conditioning over cognitive development.
And she critiques methods like red words and success for all as kids chanting back answers like parrots.
Yes, where no such transfer occurs, causing frustration and dehumanization.
Reinforcing her point about training versus learning.
Exactly. She targets these as prime examples of Skinnerian training disguised as education. Rote memorization, repetitive drills, chanting back answers like parrots. They fail to foster real comprehension or critical thinking, she argues.
The key issue.
No such transfer occurs. Kids aren't internalizing knowledge or developing independent skills. They're just conditioned for specific responses. This leads to profound frustration and dehumanization, reducing them to raw resource to be prepared and molded as a product for a predetermined role. stripping them of individuality and intellectual agency, turning them into compliant cogs.
Moving beyond the classroom, she claims significant changes in governance and control, school-based decision-making and site-based management, replacing elected school boards.
Yes, with unelected principals, teachers, and selected parents who support radical changes, she claims.
Operating with minimal hindrance, not accountable to elected officials, dissenting parents, or the taxpayers, sounds like eroding democratic oversight.
Iserbyt argues this shift is a calculated move to centralize power while giving an illusion of local involvement. Replacing elected boards with hand-picked committees bypasses direct public accountability, she contends.
And these committees push the agenda.
These unelected decision-makers, she claims, are often predisposed to support the radical changes Iserbyt critiques. The result? They operate with minimal hindrance, insulated from dissent, allowing controversial reforms without true democratic oversight. A deliberate strategy, she says, to dismantle local control.
She even quotes a school superintendent, Daniel B. Keck, describing how the state bypasses elected boards, creating a direct pipeline to local schools.
Yes, making administrators accountable to whoever sets the curriculum, removing checks and balances.
A vivid picture of accountability shifting away from communities.
For Iserbyt, Keck's quote is a candid admission of systemic dismantling of local control. The direct pipeline from the state bypasses the crucial layer of elected boards, the public's representatives.
So local administrators become implementers.
By making them accountable to whoever sets the curriculum, which Iserbyt argues is increasingly centralized federal and international bodies, the fundamental checks and balances are removed. Policy dictated from above, administrators just implement, solidifying top-down control.
And she points to a plan in South Carolina by M. Donald Thomas suggesting board authority to require parents, guardians, to provide services to schools with a $50 penalty.
Yes, she highlights this as particularly alarming, an example of eroding parental rights. Mandating parents provide services, even with a small penalty, crosses a critical line for her.
How so?
It transforms parents from partners into obligated service providers to the state's education system. Underscoring her concern that parents are being coerced into compliance with the system seeking control over children's upbringing, even outside school hours, dismantling the family as an independent educational entity.
This raises deep concerns about data collection and privacy. She describes NCES handbooks, like Handbook 8, The Community, as a totalitarian data gathering system.
Yes, containing computer coding numbers, categories, and specific pieces of information gathered about anything connected with schools.
Including very personal data.
Highly personal data like attitudes, values, and beliefs, even minute details like oral health, down to number of teeth decayed. How does she interpret this pervasive data collection?
What's the purpose, in her view?
Iserbyt sees this level of data collection as fundamental to the control agenda, creating that totalitarian data gathering system. Collecting info on attitudes, values, and beliefs goes way beyond academics. It's intrusion into the inner world, designed to map and potentially influence psychological profiles.
And tiny details like teeth.
Including granular details like number of teeth decayed, speaks to her concern about the system's desire for comprehensive, almost medical-level surveillance. This vast data collection, coded and categorized, enables the system to track, profile, and ultimately manage individuals from an early age, ensuring compliance with predetermined roles, knowing everything to better control everyone.
The scale she describes is unsettling. Georgia implementing a system tracking every state education dollar down to the attendance rates and test scores of every Georgia classroom.
Right. She states the potential for abuse of power and thought control is the stuff of science fiction.
How could it be leveraged for such control?
Iserbyt views this comprehensive tracking in Georgia as a terrifying realization of her fears. Linking every dollar to individual attendance and test scores creates a complete financial and academic profile of every student, teacher, school.
Not for accountability.
Not traditional accountability, she argues, but for enabling precise abuse of power and thought control. She envisions scenarios where funding, curriculum, a student's future are dictated by these data points, allowing targeted interventions or penalties for nonconformity, transforming education into a mechanism for total societal management, like dystopian narratives.
And this extends to tracking inner lives. Maine's Aspirations Benchmarking Initiative.
Yes, collecting detailed, informative reports of their students' responses, providing an assessment of the school dynamics and their effect on aspirations, motivation, and learning. explicitly noting disregard for student privacy.
Targeting something as personal as hopes and motivations.
Iserby argues this aspirations benchmarking is deeply intrusive. The system wants to quantify and manage not just external behavior or academics, but the student's internal landscape, aspirations, motivation, learning.
The disregard for privacy is key.
For her, yes. A key indicator, it's not about supporting students, but gathering psychological profiles. A tool, she sees, for identifying and redirecting students whose aspirations might not fit the planned economy's needs, nudging students towards acceptable paths, not fostering unique dreams, integrating educational and psychological surveillance for societal control.
And parents signing parent compacts, agreeing to do things at home like provide study space, ensure bedtime.
Yes, so parents are trained, then have to sign an agreement. Another layer of control and data collection, she argues.
Turning responsibilities into mandates.
Iserbyt views these parent compacts as another subtle encroachment. While promoting good home practices, making them mandatory and requiring signatures, transforms parental guidance into formalized, enforceable mandates.
So do parents become extensions of the state?
She argues parents are effectively trained into becoming extensions of the state's educational apparatus, compelled to conform to specific home behaviors aligning with school objectives. Not voluntary partnership, but compelled participation, potential data collection on compliance, blurring lines between private family life and state control, ensuring conditioning extends beyond the classroom.
Despite all these pervasive changes and sophisticated tactics, she emphasizes there has been resistance.
Yes, she consistently points this out.
Alert parent groups have resisted for decades, and she believes many of America's best administrators and teachers have been waging a silent war against these activities, preventing complete destruction of public education, a battle still being fought.
Indeed. Her narrative isn't total defeat. She highlights this ongoing, often unsung resistance as crucial. She acknowledges the sophisticated change agent tactics, gradualism, semantic deception, bypassing democracy. But she praises the persistence of alert parent groups pushing back for decades.
And educators resisting from within.
Yes, she credits a silent war by many of America's best administrators and teachers who, she believes, actively resisted full implementation of these dumbing down activities, preventing total destruction of traditional public education. It shows awareness and opposition can still mitigate the alleged agenda.
She gives specific examples, local successes.
Yes, parents stopping the state health education program, SHEP, in Maine, initially halting a skill-oriented curriculum in Littleton, Colorado, though it later reverted.
Direct challenges to the mechanisms she described.
Exactly. Teacher opposition, too, against scripted lessons and recitation, and forcing low-achieving schools to accept curriculum based on scripted lessons methods she calls Skinnerian and dehumanizing.
So resistance is possible.
These instances, for Iserbyt, prove the agenda isn't unopposed. Individual and community agency can still make a difference.
What's fascinating is her critique of some anti-OBE efforts, opposition to outcome-based education. She claims some only oppose the outcomes, but not the Skinnerian method itself.
A crucial distinction for her.
Why is that distinction so important? What's the consequence of partial opposition?
It speaks to the subtlety, the insidious nature of the alleged agenda. Opposition focused only on OBE outcomes, specific values taught, proficiency levels, misses the deeper problem, the Skinnerian method itself.
The method is the real engine.
For Iserbyt, yes. The operant conditioning, behavioral psychology, reducing learning to predictable responses, that's the real engine of the dumbing down. She argues if teachers are trained in this Skinnerian methodology, regardless of the stated outcomes, then there can be no return to academic freedom for teachers or students.
So the method itself limits freedom.
The method itself, she views, inherently limits autonomy and critical thought. Any reform not addressing the method at its core is ultimately ineffective, misleading. A warning against superficial opposition.
Finally, she uses the Hegelian dialectic again to explain the radical center in politics.
Yes, bringing it back to Hegel.
Describing how left-wing liberals and right-wing conservatives are allegedly manipulated to create common ground character education, leading to a politics of the radical center that ultimately supports socialist programs initially proposed by the liberals. Sounds like an elaborate conspiracy.
Iserbyt views the radical center as a masterstroke of political manipulation, using the Hegelian dialectic to push a predetermined agenda. Creating perceived conflict between left liberals and right conservatives, thesis, antithesis, manufactures a crisis needing a solution.
And the solution is the synthesis.
This solution, the new kid on the block like common ground character education, is presented as a neutral, balanced synthesis. But for Iserbyt, this common ground isn't genuine compromise. It's strategically crafted to subtly incorporate elements of socialist programs initially proposed by the liberals.
Disarming genuine opposition.
She contends this politics of the radical center effectively disarms real opposition from both sides. Each thinks they're getting a compromise, while the underlying agenda moving society towards more centralized socialist programs continues unimpeded, a continuous, almost invisible shift of the societal Overton window.
So after all that, what does this all mean for you, the listener, according to Charlotte Iserby? Her massive work isn't just history, it's presented as a stark, urgent warning.
Absolutely. She believes the U.S. is living on borrowed time, facing a perilous slide into what she calls a totalitarian black hole of a socialist one-world government and an irreversible loss of freedoms.
She offers a truly grim prediction, a timeline even, stating that by 1998.
Right. Children now in kindergarten will have been through 13 years of Skinnerian world government brainwash under the deceptive guise of the new basics. This underlines her belief that the process is pervasive and deeply embedded.
And she concludes with a provocative thought about the goal being
Creating little workers. She says, the powers that be must be pretty sure of themselves to so blatantly refer to education's primary goal as creating little workers, crystallizing her concern that the true, unstated purpose is utilitarian and aimed at societal control.
Iserby ends her book with a powerful contrast, a call to individual agency.
Yes, a very strong statement.
She states, "We are human beings, not animals. We have free will. We can choose and build our futures, something animals are not capable of doing. Animals are justified in blaming their environment for their behavior. We as human beings with intellect, soul, and conscience do not have such justification."
And she leaves you, the listener, with a profound, challenging question, underscoring the moral dimension of her whole argument. How can we expect our children to grow up and become responsible citizens and future leaders if we sanction immorality at all levels of personal life and government? It's a call for deep introspection about societal values. So what stands out to you about these claims as you reflect on this deep dive into Charlotte Iserbyt's The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America? If her perspective has resonated, what responsibility do you feel to understand what she calls the hidden designs behind educational change, and crucially, to assert your own free will in shaping the future for the next generation?